Howdy, hey, friends. Welcome back to another episode of You Don't Know, the podcast where we swap our need to have the answers for everything and get some curiosity instead. Maybe with a side of humility and a dash of chaos. Or, you know, the part where we just flail around until something starts to make sense. This episode is part of a new thing that we're doing that's less polished and more personal. So today, you're getting to listen in on a conversation with one of my dearest friends and longtime mentor, Angela, aka Ange. Back in my deeply evangelical era, cue dramatic slow zoom, I was desperate for a mentor. Absolutely desperate. Someone who could mom me a little bit, maybe drop some wisdom here and there, and help me feel like I wasn't absolutely failing at every single aspect of adulthood. Then one random day at an aggressively beige women's Bible study, in walks Ange, a full-on vibe. Found out she was a mother of 6. I saw that she was wearing the funkiest outfit this side of the Mississippi. A woman who looked like she ate Bible commentaries for breakfast and could exegete you with her side eye. Turns out she'd just moved back from years living abroad in China, which explained a lot, and also made her even more intriguing. I just knew I had to have her in my life in some capacity, and so I worked up the nerve and asked her to be my mentor, and the rest is history. We have been spiritually entangled and intertwined ever since. Together, we've explored all kinds of wild territory, from deep dives into ancient biblical mysteries like the Divine Council. That one was a lot of shaky ground for me, and Genesis 1, 2, and 3 a million times over, to surviving a literal church expulsion. 0 out of 10, do not recommend. More recently, we've jumped headfirst into arenas like chakra energy, the divine feminine, Native American history and spiritual practices, and of course, the never-ending work of deconstructing our privilege and unlearning white supremacy. Just your average Tuesday. In this episode, we're talking about some of the ways that she has processed and evolved through the absolute circus of the past several years where we've all been deconstructing together. And trust me, you'll want to take notes, because Angela is one of those rare people who make you feel both deeply seen and deeply welcome. She's a fierce and faithful friend, a walking encyclopedia of body level wisdom. She constantly insists she's not the standard, and honestly, isn't that the whole point? She's just deeply herself, and she encourages you to be deeply yourself, which makes her musings so impactful. So lean back and get comfy, or if you're ADHD like me, go find a mindless task and get started and get ready to soak up the brilliance. Here's the conversation. We'll meet you in the questions. So I will do an intro that is separate from this and say who you are.
Oh, Lord.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And why you're here, whatever, which I still don't know how to put all that into words other than we need to hear from all the people. So that's what it'll end up being, I guess.
You mean all the people in my head?
Yes.
That could be a while.
That's a perfect way to start. You know that's going in there.
Oh, I'm so glad that all my personalities are welcome.
Always welcome.
This is Wayfind Podcast, where all the people in your head find the way to somewhere.
Together. As a collective whole.
I am my own collective.
Who needs other people? I have all these personalities.
You okay with that? Yeah, I'm okay with that. Okay. Oh, my.
This is a place of respect and understanding.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell us what you have for us today.
Oh, gosh.
like big picture.
Like there need to be a hymn or an offering is done before that. The word of the Lord. Now I feel like I can't be serious. What do I have? I mean, I don't know. I think I have a collective in my head of where I'm at in this journey that we're all making on planet Earth, and within the context of a Southern white girl, middle age. Yeah. Yeah.
You've been on a journey. Your whole life has been a journey, which
everybody. I mean, that is the human experience, right? And so I think that's a good place. I think specifically this part of the journey has been about trying to blend and find a place in my own self for all the things these days. And I'm deeply spiritual at my core, have always been. Grew up in the church and have experienced all kinds of amazing things in the church and awful things in the church, and trying to find my way in that. And I think in a culture right now where there's only two options, essentially you're either in the church and you're obedient to Jesus and you love Jesus and you're a person of faith, or you walked away from the church, you've walked away from Jesus, and you walked away from faith because all of a sudden church equals Jesus. And so I feel like I'm in this place where I'm like, that's not true. And so teasing Jesus / God away from the church and finding him continually to be ever who he's always been, or she's always been. It's always been. I just needed that for my own self. And there are people out there who are so amazing at doing it well. Unfortunately, I think within the traditional church setting, we're at least the traditional that we've been a part of.
Yeah, the church structure, not necessarily the church as in the church, capital C church,
not the universal church by any stretch.
But the structure we've been a part of.
These people are still part of the universal church, but in our particular tradition, we were warned against these people. And so I'm seeing even that as such a travesty to people of faith, and has probably stunted much growth from people. And so I just decided to kind of go outside that box and find my own balance. So that's kind of what, and then I've rocked a lot of people's worlds that are in my circles who've not really been up close and personal, or haven't been on their own journey at this point, or they're just not maybe experiencing it the same way I am. And so there's a lot of questions. And finally, one family member was willing to actually verbalize the question instead of just being like, oh, what's the matter with Angela? Why doesn't she go to church anymore? Why doesn't she do this or that? So the family member asked me, using my own words, from my 40s, to what end? And so that kind of launched me into not a defense. I just don't have anything to defend anymore, which is another hallmark of the journey. But an explanation for my own self, where am I in all this? And so I feel like continually, and that answer is evolving. It's not, even now, it's not the same as it was 3 months ago. But I feel like there's some kind of the things I'm settled on that may be becoming clearer or more developed are there, but there are some just core groundings for my own self that I can articulate now that I probably couldn't before.
Awesome. So you have notes.
Yeah. I'm still a
You really worked it out.
Heart.
Yeah.
And if I'd had a penis, I would have been a pastor, and thank God I don't have a penis, and thank God I was not a pastor, because there are pastors who are doing this. So I'm thankful for those men and women who are leading out of an evolving faith, but I'm not exposed to too many of them.
Okay, well, let's take us through at one point, I think you called them pillars. You think they're pillars? What are they?
I think for me, they're more groundings. Just again, and this isn't just something like, I think in my faith that I have expanded my understanding and my curiosity about. It is like all of my life. Perimenopause, the changes in a woman's body will do that to you. It'll just make you reevaluate all the things. Plus, I'm in a high transition time of my whole life. My children are mostly raised. I now have grandchildren. I mean, my marriage is a fun time because we're not bound by like actively parenting littles anymore. And so we have more free time, and yeah, there's all kinds of things that are changing. And I think it was inevitable for me to be able to like circle back around and like take time to reevaluate and readjust. And I think that was the grace of God actually to bring me to a place of doing that. So this is kind of, as of today,
Yeah.
early 2025, this is where my groundings are, like where I keep coming back to these things and I think the family member was curious, like, do I even believe anymore? And then the question would be like, what do you mean? Yeah. Everybody believes in something.
Right.
So I think she was more curious of what do I believe, and did it resemble things that she knew me to believe before. So some of those things, yeah, they're just evolved differently.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
groundings.
I like that. I prefer that. That feels better. Yeah.
And pillars kind of seem immovable, which is again another thing that I'm done with. Like they just seem a little more permanent. Where groundings, like you can ground here in North Georgia, or you can go across the world and travel to Italy and take your shoes off for a minute. You can go to the beach in Florida or California, and you can take or South Carolina or whatever, and you take your shoes off and you can ground there. You can ground wherever you're at. And
you
so
can have grounding bed sheets.
Yes, you can.
Ground in your bed.
I do. That sounds a little, not grind. Ground. We said ground. That's a different podcast.
Episode. Yeah. Maybe one day. Item on there.
Excuse me.
That's good.
Grounding.
Groundings. Here we go.
Need to ground so I can see yet another beautiful thing of your midlife. Well, answering the question to what end, and I think is such an important question. And so I will pause on that because I think I got myself into a lot of trouble. And this is a question that God really prompted in my heart in my 40s. To what end did I do everything? So it was a self-awareness question of being able to examine my own self, my own motives for pretty much everything. And it was gruesome. And so there wasn't shame involved, which I think we so quickly go to. It was really just acknowledgement, which I know now was the foundation of where I'm at. Like this process did not start the minute we quit going to a traditional church every Sunday. This process started when I was a young girl, and I've been able to journey backwards as well and figure out and find out and discover these beautiful things all along the way that were leading me to this point. So I feel like this is exactly where I'm supposed to be today. And it may be different 2 weeks from now. So
yeah.
First answer to the question is to what end? To the end that I pursue cosmic and common wholeness. And again, most of these are going to revolve around a faith kind of answer. I could give you to what ends in my own health, my own body, my sexuality, my marriage, this is specifically to spirituality. Okay. But it's going to impact everything else, as we now know. So like this cosmic and common wholeness. And then my belief statement under that, I believe that God created all things to work in tandem or partnership together to the end that we all share in mutual benefits and fruitfulness. I mean, I think you see that in the garden account that we have in the Bible, that God created all things to work together. So it's not just humans, and it's not just men.
Right.
It was all things.
Yeah.
We take care of the earth, and the earth takes care of us. We get to enjoy the night sky, but we also don't want to pollute the night sky so that we can actually reap the benefits, and it's freer.
Right.
And I'm working really hard at not casting blame on structures or systems that we have been exposed to, but just saying, this is what I believe now, and this is what I would like to go forward and contribute, instead of looking back and critiquing. That'll fall on somebody else's shoulders. I just don't, I've been there, done that, and I'm decided I'm I'm leaving that behind a little bit. So I'll try to steer clear of bringing out the stuff and just let it sit where it is.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, in Rebekah's episode, we talked a lot about how important history is, but that's for the learning so that you don't repeat the same mistakes. It's not to critique to no end. To what end? To no end.
Right. Yeah. Right. No, I'm not saying there's not value in looking back.
Right.
Or genuinely acknowledging the wrong that's perpetrated in systems or cultivated in those environments. I'm not saying that's not. I'm just saying this again. This is kind of a personal thing of how I feel like I'm operating in the world currently, knowing I'm a part of a whole, but where I've been through every range of emotion possible, and still on multiple days can land right back in there. All it takes is a phone call, a text, an Instagram post or something, and I'm like, Rawr. But I'm realizing that for me in this season's not so profitable. So I just told a friend the other day that I hope, and maybe this is going to be a catalyst for that, I hope that my voice in this moment of time can be for somebody who feels trapped in a system but doesn't know, that thinks they only have two alternatives. You stay in the system and stay compliant to it and are just miserable, or you leave and face shame, or there are other alternatives. There's more than two choices, always. And so I hope that we can continually present, there is another way. There's multiple other ways, but this is my other way. This is option C.
Right.
So that's become my option A.
Or D or E or F. Yeah.
Or Z. So the word kind of for this summation is balance for me lately. And it's just very interesting, that word. And a lot of these words are not words that you would traditionally hear in a lot of religious settings, formal religious settings, at least in the context that we've grown up in. My mom, one of the wisest women I've ever known, who lived and loved her faith well, she always used to tell me, she goes, all things in moderation, baby. And through a season of my life, I thought that was ridiculous. Moderate, that's lukewarm. That's what we equate balanced, lukewarm, tolerant. A lot of these words have been hijacked by the systems that we've participated in and redefined to be negative and dangerous. And so I'm kind of just rebuilding my faith. And even Ecclesiastes says there's a time to tear down and a time to build. So I think just deconstruction is another word that's been hijacked by systems and made to be wrong, yet God himself built it into the fabric of the Bible. The tabernacle was to be torn down and re-erected. I mean, you see it throughout Scripture. And so if you want to talk through Scripture, then there it is. These principles are in the Bible. Even Paul, the next Jesus, I guess. Paul says to examine to see if you're still in the faith. And I think we have taken that to mean you just go back to that prayer you prayed instead of to see, are you actually living faithfully today? And continually considering your ways, the prophets would say. I mean, there's continual call to reevaluate yourself. And to what end? These kinds of questions. And so balanced is this word that continually comes to mind throughout the Genesis account, that God, you look at the symmetry even in our cosmos between, gravity itself is a balancing act. Grounding, we talked about. You've got frequencies within our whole solar system that are there to balance each other out. That creation itself between land and sky, between water and land, and between, dark and light. You've got every kind, and we call it contrast, but it's also balance. Like to have all of one would not be well. To have all men on the planet would not be well. To have all women on the planet would not be well. We need both. We need balance, and people need animals and animals need people, and we need plants and plants need us. There is a balance to be seen and to be embraced that I think there's a calling in me to continually seek balance. Am I balanced in my own person? And then equally, am I promoting balance between me and all things around me? So,
and I like that you said, I don't remember if it was in this part or the part before, but the no shame. Because so many things that you're talking about feel heretical straight out the gate. And like as soon as you start using words like cosmic and more things that you're going to talk about, and looking at the balance and seeing and acknowledging that there is a balance instead of everything being in a hierarchy. There's a top of the food chain and a bottom. It feels heretical, and you instantly feel guilty. Well, in the systems I grew up in, instantly felt guilty for considering things like that. So I love that you said guilt-free. And we've kind of all come to this place where we can ask any question. We can muse over any topic, and we never feel guilt or shame for that. Nothing is off limits, and that's okay.
Yeah. I just read a quote this morning in a book, actually, of an author that you know personally, I think, Christy Bauman, and she says that she had to realize at some point that God was not offended by what she read. And I feel like, and we'll get to that about putting this persona on God, that she is just not. It's just not there. And so we'll get to that, but that's part of my grounding as well.
Yeah. Well, I had this thought last week of how dangerous and sad and really reckless book burnings are, because I don't care what the book is. We have books that were written by Hitler himself. I don't care what the book is. It is written words. It is the ability to take your own brain and read something and say yes or no, for me or not for me, good or bad, or maybe a bit of both. There's gray, and like it's your ability to use your own brain to critically think and to make decisions and to remove words that someone else in their imago Dei, in their image of God, put on a page to contribute. Created to contribute to humanity in whatever way they thought was necessary or good. To say, nope, that doesn't get to exist anymore is wicked.
Well, and who gets to be the judge on that? That's what I find so interesting these days, is there's so many bars or standards. And I'm like, but who got the right to make that standard? And we'll throw a Bible verse on it, or because that person has a title that's associated with God, that doesn't mean that God has necessarily ordained that. And I think, again, like we've talked about, especially currently how we're practicing our faith, is that we've started realizing that most context within at least the traditions that we were a part of, which I'm realizing is not all of Christianity, it's not all parts of church culture, but at least the culture we grew up in, mostly we were told what to think, not how to think. And so I think I've always been a thinker. As an 8 on the Enneagram, I'm a challenger. And luckily, up until probably my marriage life, I had been allowed and given the freedom, even as a girl, a woman, to think and to ask really good questions. My father and my mother both cultivated that in our home, of asking questions and knowing what we thought. And though our opinions were just that, opinions, we were allowed to express them. And so I'm thankful, ever thankful for that. But I'm always trying to figure out the thing. So, really quickly, how I broke up each of these groundings is I list the kind of the basic ground principle. Then I talked about my belief from that, a word that kind of sums that up, and then how I see it in Scripture. So the balancing I mentioned a little bit, specifically in the garden, but even further, Jesus, I said, seems to continually be doing this same thing, promoting balance. And he reserved his harshest words for those people in nature even that weren't promoting common wholeness. The hypocrites, the religious leaders, even the wind and waves weren't in that moment producing wholeness because they were causing disruption. And so he rebuked them. And then his own disciples, whether they wanted to send the children away or they were inciting physical violence to protect him in the garden when he was arrested, he rebukes those situations and those people or that nature that was not promoting balance and wholeness. And so I think there again, all of these work for me as groundings that you can I still believe that the Bible is an incredible resource for understanding at least our narrative of who God is. I now think it is just a resource, and I think it is a great resource, and I think it has supernatural qualities, but I don't think it's the resource. And so that's heretical on its own, and I can continually hear and understand somebody who's not, that would have freaked me out 7 years ago. And so I can get to that place, and I'm okay with that and expressing that these days. And I'm happy to have a conversation about it. There's the first one.
I love that. I love that you're like, that's heretical. And here we go. I'm ready to have a conversation about it.
Yeah. I'm kind of, without being like, I think, again, as a woman, you have to continue. I feel like as a woman, I continually have to justify and give caveats to why I say things that could be offensive. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure all men really go through that. Of knowing what it feels like to, in any space, kind of put yourself out there with a really firm stance on something, especially if it doesn't line up with the men's opinions in the sphere. Mm-hmm. And so here I am, just kind of walking in it, but trying to walk as humbly and as kindly as possible and compassionately. So I'm fully willing to admit this sounds crazy, a little bit in some contexts, and yet other contexts, even contexts that love the Lord. It does not sound crazy at all.
It's how they function on the regular.
We've been functioning this way for hundreds of years. It's totally fine. And that's what I think is so incredible, because I feel like each one of these groundings that I've come to has only served to catapult me into establishing better and better relationships with other people of faith.
So the fruit of all of these heretical things is good fruit.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Which makes you say, is it really heretical?
Yeah.
You have to be able to ask those questions.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, here's another one that's going to blow people's minds.
I'm ready.
Just kidding. To the end that I am daily trying to find things that connect us rather than divide us. Recently, I was telling a friend over breakfast the other morning who has known me as a Bible teacher for years and years and love her to pieces. We have walked through some crazy stuff. And I was telling her the other day that what I love about the Bible and having been raised immersed in the Bible and seeing people actually live the Bible, also seeing people use the Bible as a weapon. And I too have participated in that, so I will own that. But now I don't spend every single day in the Word. So that on its own has become its own freedom, but it's still in me. It's written in me. And so it's so interesting because I'll be mulling over something, thinking over something. And there'll come a scripture verse and I'm like, oh, but the Bible says this. And I just I'm like, okay, yeah, you're right. The Bible does say that. I'm not arguing. I'm just allowing it to be the thought. And before it's over with, I'll pick back up my Bible and I will turn to the scripture that I can't get out of my head. And I will look at it and it's it's like, oh my word, I totally see that now. And that's what has happened recently with Genesis 3 specifically. Is that I really believe that the original sin was a sin of division. If you want to call it the original sin, I believe what the serpent perpetrated in the garden with Adam and Eve was division between them and God, and division between them and each other, where they saw each other as enemies and different instead of one whole connected, which God had proclaimed them to be one. And then you hear Jesus echoing that. His prayer was that we would be one as he and the Father were one. And so I think it's so interesting that any time there is like this disconnect between, oh, you're that person, those are those people. We've talked about this on repeat. Me and mine at the expense of you and yours. Those liberals, those conservatives, those Baptists, those Methodists, those Catholics, however you want to label it, those homosexuals, those blacks, whatever the label is, when you find ways to separate and divide yourself from someone else, I believe that's sin. And there's a difference to me in division and distinguished. That we can talk about that on a whole nother level, but specifically this thing. So the word for me in this section is inclusion. Again, a word that strikes fear in the hearts of many. And continually is a beckoning me back to, there are people that I don't really always want to be around, and vice versa. There's plenty of people who don't want to be around me. And I'm actually, as an 8, I'm totally okay with that most of the time. But give me at least the shot to, hack you off. Don't just not like me. But I said inclusion is a word that becomes more and more a part of my framework and daily practice of my faith. I believe God proclaims blessing on all creation, thereby including everything as a part of the whole. Like at the end of every day, he said that it was good. And he blessed the animals and told them to multiply and be fruitful. He blessed all the things, not just the humans. And so I think he included all of that in his protection, his blessing, his provision, his kindness, his grace. Therefore, I don't get to now separate those and say, well, you're not really part of the blessing. I'm only part of the blessing. So
I think that was one of the most profound, well, there were 1,000 profound things, but once we kind of shuffled out of the institutional church, coming to the realization as we spent time away, which it was during COVID, which was helpful because everybody kind of shuffled away for a minute and stayed home, which we had to do. But coming to the conclusion or realization as the thoughts started coming on their own, as I was thinking for myself instead of being told how to think, like you mentioned, that so much of my existence as an evangelical Christian in the systematic church was about exclusion, was about they're not believers, or they're not part of the remnant, or even doing mission work like inner city or across the world was going to convert them to what I think and how I believe and understand the world. It was never about inclusion for inclusion's sake. It was about exclusion unless they come over to our side. And everything was a dividing line. Every time a pastor was on the stage, it was about division between us and the church up the road, or between the people who cuss and who don't cuss, or the people who party and who don't party, or it was always us versus them. And I don't want to live that way. I don't like that. And I had to realize that it was happening before I could establish that I didn't believe that or agree with that.
Right. And I feel like there are still moments where in your mind, because of what we have grown up hearing, that you're like, well, doesn't the Bible say this? And da-da-da-da-da. And again, I think when you can, we'll get to this in a minute, but when you can really get to the place of really going back and looking at things from a different perspective, in that you don't automatically rush to what you've been taught. I'm not saying there's not value there. Some things I was taught and I still 1,000% like feel in myself is the deep truth of how things are in this world. There are other things I'm like, I never thought about it that way. There are multiple ways to interpret scripture. There are multiple ways to apply scripture. There are multiple ways. And again, like we continually have tried to uphold kind of in our community, is like, look again at the context of where this piece of literature was originally, what language it was originally written in, to whom was the original audience, and to what end was it originally written. And then that doesn't discredit it. It actually makes it all the more beautiful. But it also opens the gateway for other things to also continue and fit that mold. So the inclusion that I think we see Jesus doing, I think this was his best form of resistance. Because Jesus was kind of a rebel, and we don't like that part of him. We like the Sunday school, brown-haired, blue-eyed, fair-skinned Jesus, right, that has kids on his lap. Or we try to make him the toxic masculine man.
On the white horse with a sword.
He never was.
Yeah.
Which is so hysterical. But I said, when we see Jesus including the outcast, the sinners, the sick, the lame, women, and children in his circle, in his very community, by choosing to eat and drink with those people, quote, those people, caused quite a stir among the religious people of his day. He seemed to defy at every turn the labels and man-made rules that the people had used God's name to divide over, choosing rather to live an inclusive, God-ordained life. And I think the very heart of God is inclusion. You see continually, even in God's interaction with Abraham, who, the three main religions claim as their patriarch. You've got God saying, I'm going to bless you. I'm going to interact with you, but to what end? For the blessing of all the other peoples. And so you've got that going on. The very phrase that we've learned in Hebrew is tikkun olam, meaning repair the world, that's a mandate that they were given as the people of God to continually be seeking the good of the entire world, not just theirs, which is a far cry from what we also see these days.
Yeah. I will say the times that people in my life have been the angriest with me has always been around including people that they have made an enemy or are choosing to ignore. I mean, that is what got us kicked out of a church. I remember a time when a member of my family, this was after 9/11, when I refused to call the hijackers, if they even were hijackers, terrorists, and a member of my family was veins popping, red face screaming in my face that I'm a terrorist lover. Every time people have shown me incredible rage and anger, it has been over giving a platform to someone who they don't think deserves a platform. It's very interesting.
It is.
Your point there.
Ready for third grounding?
I'm ready.
Third, to the end that I am known by my love for God and others and not my own piety or holiness. And I think, again, this is something that I always struggled with within the context of the traditional church, because I'm spiritual at my core and I'm relational at my core. And so to be told that, like, holiness or this definition of spiritual greatness can't, you have to be careful about love. Like, really? That's a whole nother podcast. Let's talk about love, because so anyway, I'll just say that. I said, I believe that God intended that people created in God's image would bear the likeness of love, a tenacious, unconditional, radical, freeing, sharing, non-violent love for others. And then the word that continually sums up this one is acceptance. Another one I
was about to say, I can hear people in my head saying, love does not mean acceptance. And then you said the word is acceptance.
Well, let's just go and throw them all out there, acceptance, tolerance, all the things. So I said acceptance is a word I've been meditating on for the last 5 years. Acceptance of myself, who I am. And we could unpack that for years. The reason we can't accept other people is because we don't accept who we are. But we think God doesn't either. That God has to get us in this holy, pious state before he accepts us. And that's not a criteria that he gives, ever. Just going to let that sit there for a minute. ... Acceptance of God's love of all of me, not just the churchy parts. Acceptance of God being God, way more wild than I'm comfortable with most days. Of God being more wild. And acceptance of others just as they are today. And that one probably is harder for me than any of the others. Because in me is driven this want to, I'm passionate. And so I want others to like see and know, and I want them to be excited with me, and I want them to like find their best selves. And so sometimes that comes across that I don't just accept that this is what it is today. Yeah. And so I feel like sometimes I can come with expectations, and that automatically kind of like shuts somebody down because they feel like they can't ever measure up to what I'm expecting. And I realize that that's how I was raised to some degree. So I now see how I project that onto others, including my own children sometimes, and maybe my spouse. But yeah, it's this acceptance of what is and the beauty of what is. I said we see God asking questions all the time that are self-awareness prompts. This is something we've missed, I think, in the context of our own Bible. He asks prompts to those who encounter the divine. Where are you? Is a great question God asks. Who told you were naked? And then God is continually giving us cues as to how to accept the actual reality of things and know that we are unconditionally loved in that moment. So the purpose of him asking those questions, or Jesus later on asked 1,000 questions, right? He asked, who's your neighbor? What's permissible on the Sabbath? Why are you thinking these things? And who touched me? I mean, he's continually asking his own self, like these moments of the reasons they're asking the questions is so that we would take a moment to answer and know something more about ourselves and to be honest with ourselves.
In the moment.
In the moment. And
not what you think things should be.
Or what you
used
want
to be,
them to be.
What you want them to be.
Or what you even feel. And I don't know, for anybody who's grown up in the church and was kind of like encouraged to have quiet time. I think there's something, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. I think I don't call it that anymore, but there's every day I have some kind of moment where I just pause. And I think that's good, right, necessary, and healthy for just life in general. However, I think if you're not careful, whether it was prayer or you journaled or whatever, you found yourself, if you're really honest with yourself, you found yourself praying, journaling, making notes, of thinking like, if somebody were to pick this up, what would they think? Mm-hmm. And so you're not even really blatantly honest. And actually, of all people, it was Martin Luther, the writer of the 95 Theses, who started the Reformation, who wrote a book forever ago in German to begin with, and then it was translated into English, called Faith Alone. And I read that probably early 90s. And he talks about having raw faith, like naked, raw faith. And it's where you just stand completely naked, metaphorically, maybe even physically, before God. And you're not putting on any pretense. You're not trying to clean things up to make them look better. You're owning your sin. If it was a sin of lust, you're not saying, well, I was appreciating God's good creation. You know, we do that so well to ourselves, right? And so it's this accepting of what is, but at the same time, in that moment, accepting that you cannot change how he feels about you, and it's nothing but love. Whether you're in the faith or not in the faith, it's still love.
Mm-hmm. In the word or not in the word. Yeah. And you used that phrase earlier, and I do just want to define too, because the expectation that was put on me in youth group was that you were opening the book and reading the words. Mm-hmm. And I love that you expressed, it's still in me, even if I'm not reading the words on the page.
Well, that's the job of the Holy Spirit. It says in the Bible, his job is to bring to remembrance, right? The Spirit's job is to bring to our remembrance. And so, some people would contend that you have to be in the Word before that can happen. I don't even know if that's true, because Paul even seems to indicate in Romans 1, that gets used for 1,000 other things, that even creation, which was the first Bible, tells us about God, but we're unwilling to observe. And how quickly today we run to printed, translated over and over and over words before we'll just consider the lilies or look at the trees or smell the flowers and watch the birds and see how they interact. I think there are there are a myriad of ways, and I think we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. It's one of the groundings.
Okay, I'm ready.
Number 4. I feel like this is going really slow. I'm sorry.
No, it's wonderful. It's such good conversation.
Okay. To the end that I allow my thoughts about Christianity to be more about being like Jesus than fulfilling a church cultural standard. Mm. Mm-hmm. And this is where the great divide, in the best of ways. I just said I don't believe in division. But I think this church and God are not synonymous. And historically, it hasn't been. That's what I find so interesting. If so, Jesus would have come as a building. And yet we always say that church is people.
We say it.
But then why do you say come to church? I wish they call the church, call the building something else then.
Yep.
Can we do that?
Yes. Yeah.
And then I might be able to figure out how that works.
Yeah. I read a book by, I'm never going to remember it, but it's called Everywhere You Look, and it's about the church. And he said he started having kids, and he had made a mental shift that they didn't call it, they never said we're going to church. They said we're going to the place where the church meets. So they just extend how they said it.
Yep.
Because they could be doing a service day out in the community, and they're still going as the church. The church is the people.
Yes.
So just never calling the building a building. Now my kids think I'm being rebellious and I'm doing it just to be like spiteful. But I'm really trying to change the way I'm thinking about it in my brain.
Yeah. You kind of have to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So my little belief statement here under this one about Christianity being more about following Jesus than fulfilling a church cultural standard. And I think there again, that's part of that teasing out. Anyway, I believe that God operates cyclically and holistically in the world, that God is bigger and wilder than just one race, nation, or creed could understand or form a doctrine around. I believe that since God is the Ancient of Days, that there are ancient practices, texts, and wise men and women beyond our modern paradigm that are brilliant teachers for our current faith. And I think that's what's so unbelievable about part of my journey, and because I do love to read and I do love to learn, is that there are untold resources of men and women of faith that operated outside of our limited tradition or practice of our faith, that were beautiful and brilliant and loved God and were participated even in reading his word and knew his word and were unbelievable humans. And to me, that these days is more important. I read a little blip this morning that was saying that, talking about Saint Francis of Assisi, and it was saying that he decided after his conversion, he decided that he wanted to live his faith like Jesus and not a conceptualization of faith. Whew. That is huge, because I feel like what I have been in for the last several decades and participated in willingly and cultivated sometimes was more of a conceptualized faith, being articulated well to be able to lay out, these 5 truths about this or and that's what I was a little reluctant to, even with this. So this is a working document. This isn't like this statement of faith that I will never change, but it's just where I'm at now, what my thoughts are now around all this. But I don't want it to be just conceptual. I want somebody to say, we see this happening in her beyond being able to talk or being able to explain it, how we treat people. So my phrase for this one is evolving faith. And as a former homeschool mom and good Christian Southern woman, the word evolution or any form of it strikes fear in the hearts.
Yeah.
Of Darwin. Uh-huh. We could be Darwinist. Uh-huh. I don't mean that. I mean, evolution means around, right? Mm-hmm. Going around a cyclical, it implies cyclical living. So I said evolving faith is a term I'm 100% comfortable with using in regards to myself and in our community these days, to humbly be willing to place every term, concept, standard, etc. on the table, so to speak, in order to ask the really hard questions of, why do we do this? Why do I believe this? Why does this upset or anger me? And not quickly rush to defend my way of thinking or my way of acting. Am I willing to change my mind and admit to being wrong about things and people? And I think this is something that was foundational for our community. And it was foundational for our faith, me and our family even. And there's been some really complicated questions. And sometimes you just have to say, I don't know. And that's a fine, perfect answer that we're not taught is okay either. Sometimes you just don't know, and that's okay.
You don't need to know.
Or they're just things you're not going to know yet. Or I haven't spent enough time thinking about those. I don't have to have an opinion on everything. And I think that's outside the box.
And that's really hard coming from traditions that pride themselves on assuming they do have the answers for everything.
Right. Well, again, I was telling a friend the other day that I think God is way more mysterious than we like him to be, or it to be, or she to be. I'm going to continue to say that because we revert to this pronoun of a masculine. God is not male or female. He is all things, right? And so, and I feel like even this I see God continually challenging the preconceived ideas or patterns and beliefs of the people who claimed his name, the name. God gave Moses the name, I am that I am. Well, that sums everything up. I mean, so I believe in I am. And that makes people so uncomfortable. It's like silence, crickets. If that's, you know what I'm saying? I am.
How mysterious, yeah.
How mysterious and how exciting. And instead, we're like, well, we've got to formulate these.
Yes. Doctrines. And, Oh, I just sent you a reel yesterday, I think, that was kind of talking about how if you just look at what Jesus did as a human on the earth when he came, everything he said and did turned a religious institution on its head.
Yep.
He undid everything that they tried to set in stone.
Yep.
And then we turned around and took everything he did and set it in stone in a new religion.
Yep.
Which is exactly, probably not at all what his idea would be for his kingdom.
But it's not even being practiced. What he did is still not even being practiced.
Right.
As the new religion.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. It looks way more like what he was coming up against, to be honest.
Yep.
I said, Jesus comes and shows us in human form what it looks like to embody faith in the treatment of those around us, and hinges that our love of God is hinged directly to the love of others. Jesus also asked questions on repeat to provide fodder for thought and prompted more questions that his listeners could ask themselves. Questioning ourselves is a great act of humility, and questioning systems and leaders of those systems can prove just as dangerous in our times as Jesus's times. Him ending up on a cross. Number 5, to the end that I can now see and appreciate within myself and the world around me that faith is practiced in so many ways. This is a principle that I know began, I've always been culturally curious. There's another little bit of my own deep who I am at my core. And so I've always had friends who didn't look like me and didn't talk like me, or I've always loved to learn about the world and so forth. And so this has always been there. I grew up in a church that was very missional minded, in that I think sometimes in the best of ways. I'm sure there were dark sides, but at the same time, I was exposed to a lot of people from different places. And so the world was always very intriguing and exciting to me, and learning about their way of doing things, not trying to change them to ours. And so then living abroad for 4 years, I encountered all kinds of people who practiced their faith in God totally different ways than I had. And so I know that's part of this whole story. So that's continually become a grounding for me. But the added part in this is curiosity. And this is another word. I know it's a little bit of a buzzword these days, but it's such a great word. I think my husband grew up loving watching Curious George. And I think kids are inherently curious. And somewhere along the line, we tell them that it's not good to ask questions. And so I'm trying to reclaim that for my own self. But I said, I believe that God placed eternity into the heart of every image bearer, and that the ways in which humanity responds to that reality can be as diverse as are those who were created. Therefore, eternity begins when we take our first breath, and God seems to be way more about the journey and process than the paradise at the end of the Bible. In fact, the entirety of the Bible is a collection of human journeys and how God continually interacts with humanity and creation as a whole. So I think that's so interesting that we boil down to sometimes the Bible being about heaven. It's really not. It's about the human experience on every page. And anyway, we'll not break that down further. Curiosity is a practice that I'm trying to develop as I grow in my faith. Curiosity honors the other person or group by seeking to learn from and understand other perspectives and stories. Curiosity shows humility and a willingness to acknowledge our own limitations. Curiosity requires us to see that others may have a different experience with life, suffering, faith, and love. Curiosity gives us insight into the process of things, not just the end of things. And I think this is definitely a huge paradigm shift, that I care way more about who I am today and how I operate in the things of today than some far off mystical place that we know very little about. And everything that's written about it is still metaphorical. So it's not solid. And yet we try to build these really solid theologies around things that are mystery at heart. Thank you, Greek philosophers, for helping us get so logical.
Really appreciate you for that.
Yes, there's some things that have been beneficial, but also detrimental.
Well, I think just as you were saying that, like you were saying, brings me to where I am right now. Curiosity is, again, it's not, and I mean, a little bit, it can be like, why is this like this? But why is it like it right now? Which can incorporate some history into it. And what could it be could also go into the future, but you have to be here in the present right now in order to be curious. Mm-hmm. And that just, it is grounding. It brings you right back to where you are. Yeah. I love that.
And it cuts out assumptions and preconceived notions, and it really eliminates hierarchy because everybody's somebody that's on the same plane and has their own story that may or may not resemble yours. And so you can't enforce or impose your thinking on them. So it really honors people. And when you've experienced somebody who does, if you're the recipient of someone who is not curious, it is painful. And so now realizing that I've been on an apology tour for about the last 5 years here and there, had to go back and own my own stuff and look people in the eye and say, I'm so sorry that my arrogance and my ignorance disallowed me to be able to hear you, to see you, to even get to know you better, or gave you the impression that I didn't care, that it was insensitive. So that's always fun, but tried to be curious. In the wake of that, I've tried to be curious. So help me understand. Realizing too that not everybody owes me an explanation. There's a little bit of the thing in that. Jesus practiced and his disciples practiced their faith quite differently from the religious leaders of their day. Jesus was questioned many times, not necessarily with curiosity, but with arrogant and ignorant leaders whose power was threatened by his faith practices. He continued to emphasize that the heart of God was summed up entirely in our love of God and our love of others. There weren't too many more laws to be added. And yet, humans usually construct additional rules not for God's benefit, but for ours, so that we can measure our success and judge others that we don't think that measure up. So you can still ask questions and not be curious. Been there, done that. So, there you go.
Confession.
It is. And that's another part that's built into this framework, right? Is just owning your own stuff. And when you're not self-aware, though, you assume that everything you do is, good. And when you're confronted or it's exposed that it's not good, in the church tradition we've been a part of, you tend to blame it on your carnal self, your sinful self, your flesh. It's still you. It's still you. You have to own your stuff. And so I think there's value and humility in that, and there's growth that it can only come when you're willing to be blatantly honest with yourself and not suppose that because you either bear this title or because you've maintained this position for so long or you have attended this church for so long or blah, 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 that dismisses any sinful things or wrong things that you could do. And there's no shame. You just need to own it.
Okay, so I'm going to ask this question, and I don't know yet how it's going to come out. And maybe it's two-sided. Okay, for those people who are listening, what would you say to someone who is wrestling with being uncomfortable with something they are seeing or experiencing that goes against the grain of what our faith told us?
You mean if they're currently experiencing things that are making them uncomfortable in the normal context of faith, at least in the South? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes and no. Like, it could be, a lot of times, the evangelical church is told you can only vote one way. And so maybe they're uncomfortable with what their vote is bringing forth. And, or maybe they're uncomfortable with the way that their faith community handles something, and or maybe they're comfortable with things that are coming from the pulpit. Maybe they're just starting the curiosity journey. Maybe they've been wrestling with it for a long time and are just going because that's what you do. You keep going. What would you tell somebody who's wrestling, whether they're just starting to wrestle or they're in the throes of wrestling?
Great question.
I'd love to tell you.
I think at the age I'm at now, I would like to say, well done. It's okay. Yeah, keep going. You don't really need, it's so interesting, again, in my reading recently, was talking about how, in more Protestant circles, we have shamed the Catholics for needing a priest to get to God. Yet a lot of times we build churches around where you need a pastor to get to Jesus. And you don't need that. So you need good, solid people who give you space to change and grow and ask questions. And if you find yourself in a space where questions just aren't allowed or welcomed, or even if they're quickly answered in ways that kind of squelch you and stop you, I would say reconsider the space that you're in. You're always welcome at our house, metaphorically as well as literally. Come sit down at my table, come have dinner. I'd love to hear your questions. I won't have answers.
I love that. Okay, and then on the other side, I doubt there will be very many people listening who fit this category, but for people who see other people in their life, maybe it's a spouse, a child, extended family, friends, who they feel have deviated off the course. Is that the right word? Deviated? Veered off course. Or maybe they've deconstructed, or maybe they're rejecting Jesus or rejecting the church or whatever label you want to put on it. People who are in the system and they see people in their life who they think have rejected Jesus and have walked away, have deconstructed, and they're concerned for these people who have, they think, walked away or left. What would you say to them?
Welcome. No, seriously. And this is where I'm at, because you can't keep saying that you want to have curiosity and you want to be inclusive and all this. So welcome first. And then I would say, can you let your whole knowledge of this person for this moment, can you let all of your experience with this person move you and motivate you to ask, tell me more about that? Like, this is what I'm perceiving, and it makes me uncomfortable. So you also may need to ask yourself, why does it make you uncomfortable? Why does it make you uncomfortable that they're questioning, that they're not showing up at the building anymore? They're not doing this or that. Maybe ask yourself first, why does it bother you? And really sit with that. And then you can humbly go to them and say, can you help me understand? It seems like I don't see you at our meeting place anymore. It seems as though you've changed your mind on some things. This recently happened in our context, actually. My husband was with a friend who we've known for a very long time. They had a conversation. There were some follow-up emails of which there was great concern. This is another funny word that kind of is a trigger for most of us these days too, this concern.
And warnings.
Yeah, for my husband, but there was zero curiosity of how we got to this place. And the first half of the email was like, this is who I know you to be. This is who I've experienced you to be. We're not in constant community with these people anymore, just because we live far away. But like, there was no understanding of how we got here, or saying, you've just spent the first part of this email telling us how amazing you think we have always been, how you've boasted in us and blah, 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 blah. It kind of put itself on this pedestal. And now that you perceive that we've changed, there's no like, all that got apparently thrown out the window, and you're just scared to death for us and warning us and really laying out mandates of what we need to be doing right now to get ourselves back in the system, and never understanding why did we come out, that there were reasons for that. And so I was so thankful to watch my husband respond so kindly and compassionately, but also say, what I didn't hear in your email was any kind of curiosity of how we got here. And the friend to that pseudo apologized, but still really had no curiosity, just maintained that we were treading on dangerous ground. So my heart goes out, because I would have been the person. Here's the other thing. Compassion and my current self dictates the fact that would have been me. That was me. I had neighbors who went to a different type of church, who I thought their pastor was a lunatic, and I judged him all the time and probably gave them warnings about participating at that gathering. So I don't want to like just now make it so harsh, because I was that person and I didn't have compassion and I didn't have any curiosity at that point. I thought I knew it all. I had read what the Gospel Coalition talked about that pastor, or stuff he had said, and I read excerpts from, probably taken way out of context, of things that he had said, and I based my whole opinion of his whole humanity on that. So I can now give grace for people who are doing that. I know it makes you feel uncomfortable, and you may or may not be ready to question your own self yet. But that's really what's required at this point.
I love it.
Welcome to the table. Welcome to the crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome to all the voices.
It's real good over here.
Yeah, come on. I'm cooking chicken tonight.
The voices keep you company.
Thanks for tuning in to You Don't Know, a Wayfind Collective podcast. Got thoughts, feelings, existential crises? We want to hear them. Any links from today's episode are in the show notes. Love what we're doing? Read more and maybe toss us a few bucks at wayfindco.com. We're a nonprofit, so it's tax deductible and funds a lot of good trouble. Produced by Lindsey, Migliori, and Deanna West. Graphics by Rebekah Williamson. Wayfind Collective, telling better stories so we can be better humans. Thanks for being a part of it with us.